Hello, my name is Dominie Mary Stemp, and you are listening to Catholic versus Catholic.
Tell the listeners, if you would please, a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you believe, and how you came to believe it.
Okay, I've been married for 33 years and I have 3 children, and I live in southeast England. I'm a cradle Catholic from mixed marriage parents. My father wasn't Catholic, but I had a very devout granny who was a Carmelite, actually, and she taught us the faith using the original Penny Catechism. So I've always been Catholic. I did have a rebellious period when I went to university, and I stopped going to Mass, and I just didn't practice the faith. But I was very strict with boys, and I didn't really date anyone, really, apart from my future husband. And I still had a Catholic notion of morals, I suppose. Even though I wasn't going to Mass, I still knew what was right and wrong because my grandmother had been very, very strong on that. So, and I thought it was very important, not to go around with lots of different boys and things like that. So I did rebel, but when we got married, then after a year, first child came along, and then that's when I started practicing again. I went to Mass every Sunday because I wanted to have him baptized. And so then it became very, very important. My husband was a bit disappointed because he isn't Catholic. And so he found it all a bit of a shock, having not been practicing. And I wasn't even practicing when we got married. So he found it very difficult that I've now decided that it was a very important part of my life. So it's been quite a challenge, really.
I want to talk, if you would briefly, just touch on some of the earliest memories you have where you said, wow, God is impressive, religion is impressive, the piety of the people around me is impressive. Can you talk about some of the earliest memories, please?
Yeah, well, my earliest memories are really when I was about 7, and we were preparing, I suppose, for the first sacraments. And my grandmother, she taught us all our prayers, and she always had statues in her room because she only lived in one room. And she would take us in south of Kensington with her statue of Our Lady of Fatima, and she would put it on the pavement, and then we'd have to kneel down and say a decade, with passers-by and things. And then we go to another part of London and say another decade with the statue. It was in a box which had a little door, and when you opened it, there was Our Lady of Fatima, and it had all the messages on the little doors, the messages of Fatima. And she taught us all about Bernadette and Lourdes and all the saints, and so I always thought that was amazing.
Is it fair to say that in your immediate family, the women were generally more pious and devout than the men?
Yes, without a doubt. My 2 brothers lapsed, and they haven't married validly. They both married in registry offices, and one of the wives has been married before. So it's very tricky. But I do notice when I go to the Latin Mass, because I now only go to Latin Mass, there are more men who attend that. I've noticed that. Whereas when I used to go to Novus Ordo every day, it was only women, really. I don't know why. Maybe the liturgy is more kind of feminized in the new Mass. I don't know.
Now, you've mentioned the traditional Latin Mass. Maybe this is a good time for you to introduce your current position.
Okay. Well, when I started practicing again after having children, I was still a rebel as regards things like Humana Vitae, because I didn't agree with it at the time, and my husband wasn't Catholic anyway, so he totally didn't agree with it. And I really, really argued with people about it. I was a dissenter then. Humana Vitae was the encyclical that Pope Paul VI wrote in 1968, effectively banning artificial birth control. although some say that Casti Connubii in 1930 was even stronger and more black and white. Some say Humanae Vitae opened the door to natural family planning, which can be abused. But anyway, I had a religious experience in 2001. I won't go into it because it's a long story. And that's when I came to accept the teaching of the church about birth control. And that's when I then wanted to practice that teaching. And then I became very, very devout, and I became a certified parish catechist. I went to daily mass. But at the same time, I was very disturbed by the split in the church, the dissent going on, that cohabiting people went up to communion, divorced and remarried, or seemed to go up to communion. And I thought, well, that's really odd because, you know, before Vatican II, most Catholics were on the same page and they accepted the teachings. But it did seem to me that there were two camps in the Catholic Church, and I found that quite tricky because most Catholics don't accept the teaching on birth control. They think it's ridiculous. So then I found sort of refuge in the Opus Dei. I got recruited there because the main parish catechist was in Opus Dei. And I used to go to the recollections every month and go to confession. And I liked that. I thought that was really nice. And I felt kind of safe there because on the whole, they did agree with all the church's teachings. My husband was very cross though, and I had to kind of lie a bit because I didn't tell him I was going, which I don't think was right now, thinking back. So I didn't like the fact that they were encouraging deception in a way. Anyway, I broke with them after a few years because this was after Pope Francis became the Pope, and he wrote an encyclical, I think it was Laudato Si', which I found a bit strange. And I've just seen all sorts of problems with this papacy. And I'm quite vocal, and I used to write articles for some Catholic papers, and I do quite a bit of Twitter. Anyway, they started spying on my tweets. So I had little chats with them. They said I mustn't do any more writing without asking their permission. So they said, oh, you must come to us before you write anything, because, we don't really like what you're writing. But other things I didn't really like about their way. I thought it was very strange the way they recruit people. They're your friend. They're really good friends with you. And then, it's only a way to get you into the Opus Dei. But, I mean, they're very nice people. And I made some really good friends. But once you leave, you're more or less dropped like a hot cake. And also, I found it odd that their founder, Jose Maria Escriva, was made a saint very quickly. I think he's the fastest one ever to be made a saint. They never used the devil's advocate with any of the post-conciliar saints. I think John Paul II introduced the new way of making saints without the devil's advocate. So I question some of the new saints now because I'm not sure, well, did they really get scrutiny required? That they used to get the real scrutiny before the change. So I left them and I went to Society of St. Pius X. Because, it was the Latin Mass. And actually, I was going to the Latin Mass when I was with Opus Dei, but even then, they didn't really like that. They thought the Novus Ordo was absolutely fine, and why do we need the Latin Mass? And they didn't say not to go, but they weren't very encouraging about it. So I went to St. Pius X, and I've made some good friends with them. And it's a bit of a trek. It takes, a good half an hour to get there every Sunday. And recently they've just changed the time to 8:30 in the morning. So that's a bit early. I now go to an independent parish It's not really a parish. I guess it is a Sedevacantist one, but they are validly, it's probably illicit, but they're validly ordained priests. Because that was one of the other things I was worried about. Archbishop Lefebvre was doubtful of the new rites, the Episcopal ordinations. He said they were doubtful. That worries me, and indeed I want to get conditionally confirmed in the old rite.
So are you firmly Sedevacantist?
I don't know, because there could be a pope out there that we just don't know about. I don't know. I mean, I've listened to Pope Michael, and he's quite sensible.
I like him. I like him a lot. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the scandal in my church, the Novus Ordo Church. What do you make of it? What's your perspective? What have you learned? Has it helped you at all to grow in your own faith journey and your walk with God and your own struggle to be pure and to be holy as God is holy and to be perfect as God is perfect? Has it helped you at all?
As much as it's very disturbing, I think it's good that it's all coming out now. You can't just keep sweeping this under the carpet. And the American church, they're all going to be investigated now, the New York diocese, by the state police now, because the church can't police itself. And just yesterday, I believe that Italy, an Italian paper, have now got this 300-page dossier, which Pope Benedict had commissioned before he resigned, which 3 cardinals actually wrote the dossier, and he handed it to Pope Francis, I believe, when he resigned, but it's never been discussed, it's never been sorted, and it involves financial mismanagement and immoral behaviour in the Vatican. But this paper, I don't know exactly what they've published because I haven't seen the English version. They have it apparently, but I don't know what they're going to put. And obviously the Vigano allegations came out 2 weeks ago, and he's now living in fear of his life. And now, of course, Michael Voris, having been never criticising Pope Francis, he now has calling for him to resign. So wow. That's a real about turn.
Yeah. I've always been a tentative fan of Church Militant and Michael Voris. I've appreciated the work that he's done. I've always been a little bit skeptical that maybe he may be prone to a little bit of radicalism, maybe lacking a little bit of moderation. I think it's going a bit too far to call for the resignation of Pope Francis. God only knows what the truth is, but I think we should be cautious and patient.
I agree. I mean, Vigano, I think he is the first sort of major prelate to call for the resignation. I think he's the main one. But again, I don't know it's every day there seems to be some kind of new thing. I mean, even Dr. Taylor Marshall, do you watch him at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously questioning as well what's going on, and he actually apologized to Michael Voris. He used to think he was absurd, but now he's saying, well, maybe you're right. He did it on Twitter, actually. Twitter's a great place for getting information.
I still don't know how to use Twitter. I just am completely incompetent when it comes to social media for many different reasons, mainly because I'm just socially awkward. I don't have a lot of social graces and know what the right thing is to say to people.
You do very well on your podcasts. They're very good. Yeah. It's interesting, about Pope Michael. He's on Facebook under David Borden. And I did ask him the other day, I messaged him and I said, do you really, really think you're the Pope? But he hasn't got back to me.
That's a good question. I didn't ask him that question. He hasn't answered me. Did you listen to my interview of him?
I did, yes. He's very listenable. Yeah.
I just found myself mesmerized. I didn't get controversial with him at all because he was just so pleasant and fun to listen to.
Yes, I mean, who knows? I mean, we've had the time of 3 popes, for goodness sake. We've got 2 visible ones, because Father Kramer said Benedict never resigned the spiritual side. He only resigned the administrative side, and that's why he still wears the white. You should interview Father Kramer, actually, Father Paul Kramer. He's written several books, actually. on the crisis and Fatima and all that.
Yeah, speaking of Fatima, some of the approved apparitions I'm very touched by. Fatima, Lourdes, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of Good Success down in South America.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm really, really, really petrified of one that
Medjugorje?
Yeah, it's so demonic. What can you tell me from your experience? Do you know people that are fanatically obsessed with it?
Absolutely, I do. I did go to Medjugorje about 4 years ago, and I took the family, actually. And there is a big statue of our Lord on the cross, and water comes out of it. And there's queues of people going up to touch this water. I don't know, but a friend of mine did have it tested. She's a scientist. And she said it was of human origin. So this is what I'm not sure about. Yeah. Maybe something is happening there, but something demonic is going on at the same time. I don't know.
For sure. The main cue for me is the disobedience of the Franciscans, first and foremost, and then the disobedience of the alleged seers. They're very uncooperative, and they always have been. Not to mention just the regularity of these apparitions, like tens of thousands of apparitions.
I know.
It's just
weird.
Disturbing.
It's so weird.
Were you disturbed when you were physically there?
No, not at all. There were lots of shops, the usual, selling rosaries, as in Lourdes, Fatima.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, when I had my religious experience, it was actually on the 13th of May, 2001. So it was on the Fatima day. And that's what got me really into Fatima. And I've been brought up with Fatima anyway, but I love the way that Our Lady is so clear to the children. You know, all the teachings, she confirmed all of them, and the children had to receive Holy Communion on their knees and on the tongue. And then she showed them a vision of hell. So she was sort of confirmed all the sort of main teachings, I suppose, and it was all very clear. And the miracle of the sun, that happened. That is a proven event. The fact that 70,000 people saw the sun move. Lourdes, I've always loved the Bernadette story with the innocent young girl. She didn't even know what the Immaculate Conception meant. You know, that's how simple she was. And of course she was persecuted for a while because they said she was making it all up. I've been to Lourdes once, and I do get a good feeling there, actually. The other one I like is Our Lady of Good Success. That's interesting because a lot of it refers to the 20th century, where there was going to be a corruption of morals from the 1950s onwards, and the sacraments of marriage would be attacked. All sorts of things that have come true according to that apparition. Do you know that one?
Yeah, that's one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites.
That's and very interesting how the statue was completely formed. I can't remember how it happened, but in the chapel.
They weren't happy with the artistry of the artists that they tried, and then just one morning they woke up and there was one ready-made.
Yeah.
I do feel somewhat awkward about some of the statues of Mary.
Yes.
Some I find very beautiful, some I don't find that beautiful, and that particular statue, I just don't find it that beautiful. And I've read somewhere where Jesus communicated to one of these mystics that it doesn't matter the beauty of the representation, what matters is God's grace. So I'm comfortable now having an opinion about artwork, even if it is made by angels. It may be because I am impure. Maybe that's why I don't see the beauty in certain representations in these statues. But maybe we're not supposed to be overwhelmed with the beauty of a statue. Maybe we're supposed to go beyond that. Have you experienced that sort of feeling where you've seen a painting of Jesus and you just thought, oh, that's a little bit off, or it's not quite as appealing as it could be? Have you seen that?
I'm not very keen on the modern ones, I have to say.
Yeah.
There's a local church here, and they've got a statue of Jesus in jeans outside of the church. It's horrible.
Oh, God. It may have been done by some street kids or something.
No, it's been done by a famous sculptor.
Oh.
Someone died and they left this money to have a statue made. looks like David Beckham, in sort of casual clothes.
Oh boy!
And it's hanging up above the door when you go in.
Strange.
So, yeah, it's strange.
God is incredibly humble. He's very, very patient with us.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I think if you've had children, so you've seen when your children are very young and they make an ugly drawing of you, but if they do it with love, that's all that matters, right?
Of course.
Now, this brings me to the question of superstition. Non-Catholics think that we worship Mary, we worship statues. Can you talk about where is the fine line for you between superstition, which is evil and condemned by the Church, and true piety, true devotion, and these things that seem to Protestants, for example, to be a violation of the first commandment? Can you just talk a little bit about superstition and idolatry, please?
Well, they think we worship Mary because we have a lot of pictures of Mary and statues, but I try to tell people, well, don't you have photographs of your family? You don't worship the photograph, do you? We don't worship the statues. They are reminders of what they represent. So we do not worship statues. We don't worship Mary. We revere her as the Mother of God. And, we need pictures to remind us. I mean, I have a little statue of Mary by my bed. I have one on my desk. They're only 10 centimeters tall, but they're just reminders. And obviously I have to be a bit careful because my husband doesn't like seeing lots of religious pictures around the place. So I have to be a bit careful about where I put things. I mean, my grandmother used to give out miraculous medals to people on the London buses.
That's cool.
And rosaries. She'd hand out these missionary rosaries and things. And I suppose people might have thought that was being superstitious, but
no.
And wearing the miraculous medal. She brought us all up to wear the miraculous medal.
But
I don't, because my husband is offended by it, so I don't actually wear overtly religious symbols. I have a rosary ring that I made, that I had made, and it's a gold one. But that's very subtle. It's there, but it's not in your face sort of thing.
Yeah. Every sacramental, the Church teaches very clearly that it's prayer. That's all that it is. It's the power of prayer. So we have prayer and then we have the sacraments. Sacramentals fall under prayer. But there are times where when I'm seeking protection from demons and evil in general, there are times where I think, am I being mercenary here, or is this a sincere prayer of love? Am I motivated by pure selfishness, or is there love behind my demand for protection? What is your experience with protection and these sorts of St. Michael prayer and these sorts of things?
Yeah, I say the St. Michael prayer, but if you read Gabriel Armorth, do you remember he's the main exorcist at the Vatican?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Gabriel Armorth, he used to write about things like we should have holy water by the bed and blessed salt to ward off any demonic activity. The sacramentals, they help you. I don't know if you've read his books.
No.
About his experiences, but the holy water is really strong, very powerful. I mean, Padre Pio apparently fought devils in his cell. I mean, he was bruised. He's my favourite saint, actually. But he fought a lot with the devil. Or it might have been one of the devil's minions. He was constantly battling.
Same with St. John Vianney. Do you remember the stories of St. John Vianney?
I don't really know much about St. John Vianney, but he was the very simple priest who probably wouldn't be allowed to be a priest because he wasn't very intelligent. Is that right?
That's right.
He was very simple, but he had cues of penitence to his confessional, and the whole village started practicing once he was put in that parish, I believe.
Yeah, I've got chills now just as you're talking about him because he's so powerful. He was very, very humble, and he got people to confession and he got people to practice. So
he didn't need to be, you don't need to be really intelligent.
No.
So, because he nearly didn't make it to the priesthood because of that.
They were desperate for priests, though, at that time. Very desperate.
Right.
And I think we're desperate today, too. So we may have some simple-minded saints coming our way soon.
Yeah.
What about Saint Brother Andre? He's another character that's very similar. He saw people's souls, and he gave confessions a lot, and he healed people here in Montreal. Saint Brother Andre Bessette. Have you heard about him?
No, I haven't. Which century was he in?
He was the 20th century. And he was a nobody. Nobody respected him. He was a doorman. He was not very educated. He was not very bright. But he was a simple, humble man who had a sincere love of St. Joseph, and he built this huge monumental oratory to St. Joseph during his own lifetime. And I have the privilege of living in the city where I can actually just go and pray at his tomb, and his heart is exposed in a glass and these sorts of things. And he's
Canadian, see?
Yeah, he's Quebecois from Quebec. So look into him.
Lovely.
Yeah, look into him. He's a very simple, humble man. And speaking of saints, you've named a couple of your favorites. Did you want to list one or two more of your favorites?
Yes. Well, when I started my spiritual journey properly, I read The Story of a Soul by Saint Therese. So I had got very close to that Saint Therese. I loved the book that she wrote. Was just incredible. It was my first real kind of getting into spiritual reading, The Story of a Soul, and that really got me on the road of lots of reading. Well, the other one I really liked was John Bosco, which my grandmother gave me the biography of him, and he was quite incredible too.
For sure.
Maximilian Kolbe. And he's, I suppose, a recent, a kind of modern saint, I suppose. He gave up his life for a family man in the concentration camp. And obviously Pope Pius X, he introduced Holy Communion for children, and he wrote a great catechism. But Padre Pio, I suppose, is my favourite. I went to his shrine recently. It's a hideous new church. It's really grotesque, actually. But I went into the church where he used to hear confessions, in the old church, actually. So the old church is beautiful. The modern one is extraordinary. I don't know if you've been to it, but no. It's well, I mean, either you like very, very modern architecture or you don't, but it just doesn't look like a church to me.
Yeah. I understand. Have you ever encountered a saint where you just weren't feeling it? It's just like you may have learned a lot about the saint, but you just weren't feeling inspired or in love with the saint. Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, I think so. I have to say I found reading St. Teresa of Avila difficult.
Okay.
I tried to read it, but I just couldn't. It was too highbrow for me.
Oh, okay.
Some of it's just too, I suppose, mystical. Yeah. I don't know. It's just too high.
What about St. John of the Cross?
He's very highbrow too, I think. Not that I've really read it, but I should do. My grandmother gave me a book on him, but I probably didn't get on with it.
St. John of the Cross is one of the first saints that I ever read that I thought, I'm not feeling this, I'm not getting this, I'm not digesting this, I'm not feeling a lot of warmth, I'm not feeling inspiration. I love him because he loves God so perfectly, but I just can't access, I just don't have access to that level, you know. So, so I think this is something where God knows each and every one of us is unique, we have special needs, and he brings us a wide variety of saints that we can be drawn to and that we can learn from, because he meets us where we are. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
It's incredible, really, when you think about the economy of salvation, how generous God is giving us the saints.
Absolutely, and they're also different.
To know them is to love them, but we don't have the capacity to fully know every saint. We have a limited capacity to know some of them in a limited way, but I think all of eternity will be unfolding and unpacking the gifts of the saints and of obviously the God himself in the Holy Trinity. It's infinite. And we have a lot of discovery to look forward to for all eternity. And I don't really understand my atheist friends when they say that heaven is boring. Far from it. We get a little taste of heaven in the church and in the saints, and it's not boring.
Well, I can't understand how they're not scared of hell. I mean, people don't believe it anymore. There doesn't seem to be a fear of the consequences.
How often do you think about hell or meditate on hell?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot, because I don't want to go there. And I'm very confused, because if you're on the wrong path, you're on the wrong path, and I don't want to be on the wrong path, but it's very hard. Yeah. It's really hard, I think, to be in the situation today, because it's confusing.
What do you think about the little way of Saint Therese? Do you think that her little way can serve you and to help maybe get rid of some of your fears and anxieties? Trusting in God like a father and just going to him simply and directly.
Well, I actually pray the prayer to St. Bridget every day,
nice.
Which is, if you say the prayers for a year, every day for a year, you will have done the same amount of time that our Lord was lashed during the scourging. He told St. Bridget this. But he attached 15 promises to all those who say this prayer for a year. And one of the promises is that he will convert 15 of your friends.
Wow.
And there's all sorts of really good stuff, actually.
Okay.
I found it in my grandmother's writings. I was just going through her books one day, and there was this pamphlet that she'd sellotaped in the book, and I got it out and I read it and I thought, right, I'm going to do this. So the first prayer, you say one Our Father, then one Hail Mary, and then you say the following. Shall I just read this paragraph?
Yes, please.
O Jesus Christ, eternal sweetness to those who love thee, joy surpassing all joy and all desire, salvation and hope of all sinners, who hast proved that thou hast no greater desire than to be among men, even assuming human nature at the fullness of time for the love of men. Recall all the sufferings thou hast endured from the instant of thy conception, and especially during thy passion, as it was decreed and ordained from all eternity in the divine plan.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I was given a penance once where I had to say those prayers. It all fit on one 8.5 by 11 page of paper.
Right, yep,
but
that sounds right.
I was given a penance where I had to say that every day for a month.
Okay.
Because it was a general confession.
Right,
and I sort of tried sincerely to tell absolutely every sin that I'd ever committed, which is not easy because I'd been 25 years atheist, and so it wasn't easy, but I think God sees the sincere attempt to remember everything, and I think that
absolutely
that works. I have trust in God. But there's another prayer that you're reminding me of, the prayer of Saint Gertrude. I don't know if you've heard about this.
Yes, I have heard of Saint Gertrude.
Eternal Father, I offer thee the most precious blood of thy divine Son, Jesus, in union with the masses said throughout the world today, for all the holy souls in purgatory, for sinners everywhere, for sinners in the universal church, those in my own home and within my family. Amen. Allegedly, I mean, the church doesn't guarantee that the promises that are attached to these sorts of things are going to be fulfilled, but it's a pious belief that the church tentatively approves of, and the promises attached to this particular prayer are that something like 5,000 souls will be released from purgatory when you say it sincerely.
That's incredible.
And the thing about God is that he always gives more. He never gives less, right? So we need to be really bold with God, and we really need to have confidence in God that he wants to give us always more and more and more and more. We should be bold in asking for stuff that that we don't deserve, and stuff that grace is that seem ridiculous. Like I ask, for example, to skip purgatory, I want to die a saint in the odor of sanctity. That is absolutely ridiculous. If you knew me, you would say, you're wasting your breath, you're a complete fool.
You know about the Sabbatine privilege, don't you, attached to the scapula?
Yeah, but I mean, even one day in purgatory is too much for me. I'm very sensitive to pain. It's very painful, but yeah, I don't think enough people try to avoid purgatory. Like even faithful Catholics,
Yes.
You do often hear people say that they would be content to make it into purgatory.
My father was an atheist, and when he died, the priest came round, and the Catholic priest, he thinks my father had a deathbed conversion, actually.
Nice.
So, and I thought to myself, well, you know, if he's made it to purgatory, because he'd spent his whole life not believing, although he was baptized in the Church of England, but, you know, he didn't believe. And I thought, well, that would be brilliant. You know, if he's made it to purgatory. Because there's only one way to go after that, and it's up.
Yeah.
There's no way of going down once you're in purgatory. We were we're just hopeful that he really did have a deathbed conversion.
I hope so.
Otherwise, yeah, hell is not somewhere we want to go.
No. People need to just meditate on hell for 5 minutes a day. Just think about it. It's so powerful. And it's not, the fear of hell is not a perfect way, but it is a valuable way.
Yeah.
We should first and foremost do the right thing.
Yeah.
We should be good for goodness sake and love God for God's goodness.
Absolutely.
But the fear of hell, the church has been very clear about this, that the fear of hell is a good starting place. It's a very good starting place.
But Our Lady Fatima, she said that a lot of people went to hell, and the main sin, I think she said, was the sins of the flesh. You know, but because the trouble is there's this acceptance now, isn't there, that, oh, well, everyone's doing it. So, you know, how can it be wrong to live together before you're married and all that? They think it's absurd to even think that you should be living separately. It's become the norm. This is the problem.
My ways are not your ways, says the Lord. We just have no clue how far we've strayed as a society. And to say that we're a Christian culture in the West, I think, is a bit of a stretch today. But I always think about one of my first favorite saints when I was at Sunday school, before I lost my faith at the age of 14, dramatically. My favorite saint, one of my favorite saints, was Saint John the Baptist, and he died for the sanctity and purity of marriage.
Yeah.
But if we look at the Bible, Old Testament and New Testament, there's such an emphasis on purity, such an emphasis on marriage, such an emphasis on Jesus Christ and the church, the pure, spotless bride. And if we look at the prophets that are constantly talking about how the chosen people have whored themselves and they're behaving like prostitutes, and just the way that we sully ourselves, not only sexually, but in terms of loyalty, in terms of the first commandment, putting God above all things. The whole Bible, from beginning to end, it's all about that relationship. How do we psychologically justify the impurity of our ways and abortion? And it's just mind-boggling. I'm not putting myself above anyone here. Honest to God, I'm not, because I'm a very disgusting pervert myself. But I'm, by the grace of God, I'm saying no to myself and yes to God now, right? Struggling and striving to do the will of God. But
it's hard, tragic, isn't it, when the laws of the land say something which go against God's commandments, those laws then become acceptable to the majority. I mean, like gay marriage, I can't believe how that has now become so accepted here. I mean, I remember, 20 years ago when they were talking about it and most people were against it.
Same-sex marriage?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the minute it passed, that now becomes acceptable.
Yeah, it's sad, it's tragic. We need to pray for ourselves, for our own conversion, and for everyone around us. It's very, very scary thinking about anyone going to hell. I mean, when people often use Hitler as the poster child for evil, and he was very evil, but he was good by nature. He was created by God, and he is destined for heaven. So I hope that he converted, and I wouldn't wish hell on him or on anyone else, even the pedophile priest that's done the worst crimes. I don't wish hell on that person. I wish that person conversion.
Well, I hope they convert in time. Well, sorry.
Time's running out. So speaking of time running out, I'd like to end on a very positive note, and you're the one that's going to make that positive note. So you've listened to my show before, so you know that I like to end with a little thought to the listener. Not everyone that's listening, obviously, is religious or has found God yet, so they don't necessarily have that. So you could speak it just in general terms. So what might you be able to say to anyone that might be out there listening now?
Well, I think things are getting to some sort of head in the world at the moment with all these weather changes and things happening in the church. But I think you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that evil will be defeated, but it's going to be quite torrid to get there, and God will triumph. He is going to quash that evil, the devil. All these things are going to stop, all these wicked behaviors, I think will stop. I don't know how, but God ultimately, he'll win.
If you like your worldview, if you think it's swell, if you've got some questions, ask me and I'll tell. All you got to do is ask. All you got to do is ask.